My life was a symphony of ordinary moments. 20 years of profound, undeniable love with the only woman I ever truly saw. Then, in an instant, everything shattered. As her last breath left her, I was catapulted into a reality where time ceased to exist, engulfed by a love beyond all human understanding. What if the very act of losing everything could reveal the ultimate truth of existence?
If this story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, what does true love mean to you? Or how have you walked through loss yourself? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Now, I won't keep you. Thank you for watching, and may this story meet you where you are.
We were overwhelmingly in love. The couple people would ask, "How do you guys do it?" There was simply no one else for either of us. Before that day, my life was a comfortable, predictable rhythm, a tapestry woven with the threads of routine and an ever-present, profound love. I was, for all intents and purposes, an ordinary man living an extraordinary love story. My days revolved around the quiet hum of a typical career. Nothing flashy, just consistent, steady work that paid the bills and allowed for the simple pleasures of life. We lived in a cozy house, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, the kind where you knew your neighbors but still cherished your privacy. I wasn't a man of grand ambitions or dramatic pursuits. My character was more grounded, perhaps a little reserved, finding contentment in the small details. A good book, a quiet evening, the warmth of my wife's hand in mine. Childhood memories for me weren't cinematic montages, but rather a series of soft-focus snapshots. I remembered the thrill of learning to ride my bike, the wind in my hair, a sense of boundless freedom. There was the bittersweet taste of losing a beloved pet, my first encounter with the sharp sting of grief. These moments, both joyful and tinged with sorrow, weren't monumental turning points, but rather gentle shapers, subtly influencing the contours of my developing self. They taught me about resilience, about the inevitability of loss, and about the quiet power of simply being present. Emotionally, my life was a steady, warm current. There wasn't a gaping void or a frantic search for something more. Happiness for me wasn't a fleeting burst, but a pervasive sense of well-being, deeply intertwined with my wife's presence. There were no hidden disappointments, no gnawing anxieties that kept me up at night. Our relationship was my anchor, a constant source of joy and fulfillment. We shared laughter that echoed through our home, quiet conversations over morning coffee, and the comforting silence of simply existing together. It was a contented existence, a peaceful hum that underscored every waking moment. When it came to life and death, my beliefs were straightforward, rooted in the Christian faith I was raised with. I believed in God, in the teachings of Jesus Christ, and in an afterlife. It was a comfortable framework, offering a sense of order and purpose to the universe. Death was a distant concept, an abstract inevitability that, while acknowledged, held no immediate sway over my daily thoughts. I hadn't truly grappled with its profound implications, certainly not in a personal, visceral way. My faith provided a comforting assurance, but it was a belief born more of tradition and acceptance than of deep personal revelation. Little did I know, this very foundation was about to be shaken, then expanded beyond anything I could have ever imagined.
She went to the hospital on December 26th. 5 days later, a mass appeared, confirming our worst fears. They delivered the crushing news. She wouldn't make it. She wouldn't be leaving the hospital alive. I was utterly devastated. The day itself began like countless others. A crisp winter morning in late December, though the usual holiday cheer felt muted by a growing unease. The Christmas decorations, still twinkling from our big family celebration on Christmas Eve, seemed to mock the quiet dread that had begun to settle over our home. My wife, usually the embodiment of health and vitality, a marathoner, a yoga enthusiast, someone who rarely ever caught so much as a sniffle, was simply not herself. For weeks, a persistent cough had clung to her, a small, irritating cough at first, that slowly, insidiously began to deepen its grip. It had started innocently enough in early December. A routine visit to her doctor, a dismissive diagnosis of whatever was going around, a prescription for antibiotics. We thought nothing of it. This was my wife, the picture of health. She ran daily, often before dawn, her energy seemingly limitless. We'd often joke that she was the healthier one of us. But the cough stubbornly refused to yield. A week later, she was back at the doctor's, and an X-ray showed nothing concerning in her lungs. A fleeting sense of relief, quickly overshadowed by the continuing, worsening cough. The real shift began on December 26th. The hospital, a different one this time, with its advanced imaging machines, was supposed to provide answers, to dispel the growing shadow of worry. The initial results, again, were strangely unremarkable, just a slight inflammation from all the coughing. But her oxygen level, stubbornly lower than normal, was enough to warrant an overnight stay. That's when the normal began to unravel. There were no grand premonitions, no sudden flashes of insight that warned me of the abyss we were nearing. Only a slow, creeping realization that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. Each passing day in that sterile hospital room brought a fresh wave of tests, each one confirming a grim, unspoken truth. The cough became more ragged, her breaths more labored. The worry in my gut, initially a dull ache, sharpened into a searing pain. The fear, now of the unknown, but of the certainty of an unbearable, unimaginable future. Every breath she struggled to take was a testament to the life being stolen, and it was quite literally killing me to watch.
She looked into my eyes, and instantly I was somewhere else. It was a dark, infinite space with small points of light above me, and more profoundly, I was utterly consumed by unconditional love. The air in that hospital room on January 4th, 2013, was thick with unspoken grief, a palpable weight pressing down on every soul present. My wife, my beloved, was barely clinging to life. Her labored breaths were ragged whispers, each one a torment to my ears, a cruel reminder of the suffering she endured. I knelt beside her, my hand clasped in hers, tears streaming down my face in an endless river. My world, my very reason for being, was dissolving before my eyes. The unbearable pain of her struggle to breathe was a physical agony mirroring the tearing of my own soul. I had already told her, in a broken whisper, that I would trade places with her, that I couldn't imagine a life without her. And she, in that calm, authoritative voice that wasn't quite hers, had touched my arm and said, "It's not your time." Her final words, "I love you so much," still echoed in the sterile quiet. Then, in a moment that defied all logic and expectation, she turned her head. Her beautiful blue eyes, which had held my reflection for over 20 years, met mine. In that precise instant, a profound shift occurred. It wasn't a gradual fading or a gentle transition. It was an instantaneous, breathtaking displacement. One moment I was kneeling on a cold hospital floor, drowning in sorrow. The next, I was somewhere else entirely. The space I entered was a vast, boundless expanse, not black in the oppressive sense, but a profound, soft, dark gray, or perhaps a light black, stretching infinitely in all directions.
Above me, scattered like distant stars, were about 30 tiny pinpoints of light, shimmering with an ethereal glow. They weren't bright enough to illuminate the vastness, but rather seemed to exist as independent, pure sources of luminescence within the gentle darkness. My perception of this space wasn't through my eyes, at least not in the earthly sense. It was a clarity, a seeing that transcended physical vision, an understanding that simply was. What I saw, however, pales in comparison to what I felt. The moment I arrived, I was utterly, completely and thoroughly engulfed in unconditional love. It wasn't a feeling I'd ever known on earth, not even in the most profound moments with my wife. This wasn't merely affection or devotion. It was an absolute, boundless, all-encompassing love that radiated through every fiber of my being. It was the very fabric of existence, a truth so fundamental, so powerful, that it rendered everything else insignificant. All the stress, the crushing sadness of my wife's imminent passing, the crippling fear, every negative thought and emotion that had tormented me for days, they simply vanished. They weren't suppressed or overcome. They were replaced by this overwhelming wave of love and an inconceivable joy that transcended all human understanding. In this state, I felt more alive than I had ever felt in my entire earthly existence. My normal consciousness, even at its peak, seemed dull and limited in comparison. Here, my awareness was expanded, crystal clear, operating at a level I hadn't known was. A profound sense of presence surrounded me, even before I consciously perceived any beings. It was a gentle, benevolent energy, a pervasive awareness that enveloped me in absolute safety and acceptance. There was no need for words, no audible voices. Instead, life was being revealed to me not through language, but through pure, direct understanding. It was a telepathic transmission of knowledge, a download of profound truths directly into my consciousness. I didn't hear a voice in the traditional sense, but rather understood its meaning with absolute clarity. This presence, this source of radiant love, conveyed a singular, overwhelming message. Love is the way, the truth. The feeling of lightness and freedom was exhilarating. I had no physical body, no limitations. I wasn't floating or flying in any conventional sense. It was an effortless pausing, a complete absence of physical constraints. The earthly concepts of gravity, weight, pain, they simply did not exist. There was an absolute tranquility, an unfathomable peace that permeated every aspect of my awareness. This starkly contrasted with the suffocating heaviness of my earthly existence, where even simple movement felt like an effort compared to this effortless state. In this realm, I didn't encounter specific deceased relatives or friends as distinct individuals, nor did I see named religious figures like Jesus or Buddha. Instead, I sensed their presence, an awareness of other consciousnesses within this universal field of love. They were not separate entities in the human sense, but rather integrated aspects of the vast, interconnected tapestry of existence. Their presence was comforting, a silent affirmation of the truths being revealed. Communication wasn't a dialogue, it was a mutual understanding, a shared resonance within this field of pure knowing. It was as if their very essence, their accumulated wisdom and love, was directly infused into my own being. There was no life review in the traditional sense, no rapid playback of my past actions or decisions. Instead, I was enlightened to everything. It was a true spiritual awakening, a sudden and complete comprehension of the universe's fundamental principles. I didn't see specific past or future events of my earthly life or others. What I gained was an all-encompassing knowledge about the nature of reality, the purpose of life, and the inherent interconnectedness of all things. I understood with absolute certainty that we are all one with everyone and everything. This wasn't a philosophical concept. It was an undeniable, self-evident truth revealed in the purest form. This profound understanding extended to the very nature of God. God was not a distant anthropomorphic figure, but the only presence, the source from which everything emanated. Again, words are woefully inadequate to describe this. It wasn't a belief, it was a direct knowing. This presence was the essence of the boundless, unconditional love that enveloped me.
The deepest truth that unfolded within me was that love is the meaning of life. It's not a goal to achieve, but the very essence of who we are. I understood that the purpose of existence, the grand design of the cosmos, was rooted in this fundamental love. All the complexities of human life, all the struggles and triumphs, were ultimately expressions of this overarching principle. My previous understanding of life, death, and God, while rooted in faith, was now dwarfed by this expansive, all-inclusive truth. There was no longer a need for compartmentalization, for rigid doctrines or exclusive religions. It was all-inclusive, a universal truth accessible to all. I understood that my prior beliefs were merely a narrow window into a much grander reality, a stepping stone to this profound knowing. This profound experience, this deep dive into the essence of existence, was a culmination of intellectual and spiritual insight. It was a direct transmission of truth, revealing the ultimate answers to the questions humanity has pondered for millennia. The nature of reality, the purpose of individual existence within the grand tapestry, the boundless source of love and light, all became clear. And I, the ordinary man who had simply loved his wife, was now immersed in this divine revelation, forever changed, yet still unaware of the physical reality awaiting my return.
In an instant, I was returned to my body, my wife still looking at me. This felt like an experience through my chest, not my eyes. She then turned, exhaled, and passed. I cried out, "It's a miracle!" The transition was as abrupt and absolute as my departure. One moment I was immersed in the boundless, timeless ocean of unconditional love, everything revealed, everything understood. The next, in an instantaneous, jarring flash, I was back. There was no gentle re-entry, no gradual fading back into awareness. It was a violent reintegration, a sudden re-emplacement into the physical form I had so effortlessly transcended. The shock was immense. The lightness, the freedom, the boundless joy, all were violently replaced by a crushing heaviness, a profound sense of gravity pressing down on me. It felt like being suddenly encased in lead after soaring unbound. My eyes, or what I perceived as my eyes, were still locked with hers. My wife, my beautiful wife, was still looking directly into my gaze. It was as if no time had passed in the earthly realm, though for me an eternity had unfolded. This whole experience, this profound journey, felt like it had been processed not through my physical senses, but through my very chest, a deep, visceral understanding that bypassed the...
Their silence, heavy and unyielding, was my answer. I had incorrectly, heartbreakingly assumed that everyone had witnessed this miracle, this profound truth that had been revealed. Instead, they began to slowly, quietly slip out of the room, into the hospital hallway, retreating into the lonely cocoon of their individual grief. My miracle was to them simply the final heartbreaking flicker of life in a dying woman, a moment they interpreted through the lens of profound loss. My physical state was a confusing jumble of sensations. The overwhelming peace and lightness of the non-physical realm were replaced by the raw, undeniable reality of my body. A profound weakness settled over me, a physical exhaustion that hadn't been present before. My limbs felt heavy, my head slightly disoriented. The emotional shift was equally disorienting. The infinite joy lingered, a deep, resonant hum beneath the surface, but the immediate, crushing sorrow of her death was also undeniably present. It was a strange duality, profound peace intertwined with earthly grief. My first attempts to share were met with polite nods, averted gazes, and an undeniable aura of discomfort. How could I explain the inexplicable? How could I convey the reality of a love that transcends the physical, a knowledge that obliterates all earthly fears to those still firmly rooted in the limited perceptions of this world? My words felt inadequate, hollow, failing to capture the vastness of what I had experienced. It was clear, my truth, my miracle, was a burden for them, something they couldn't or wouldn't comprehend. The profound isolation of having witnessed such an extraordinary event, yet being unable to truly share it, settled over me like a new, unfamiliar cloak.
After this experience, all fear, especially of dying, vanished. My priorities shifted entirely. I now understand we are all deeply connected. My former life is gone. I am now connected to life itself, just like everyone and everything. The return was a brutal re-entry into a reality that now felt both strangely familiar and utterly alien. The man who knelt by his dying wife was irrevocably gone. In his place stood someone forged in the crucible of infinite love and universal knowing. The most profound and immediate change was the utter eradication of fear. Death, which had been the most terrifying concept imaginable, became nothing more than a transition, a shedding of the physical form. The fear of anything else, loss, failure, judgment, simply dissolved. When you've experienced the boundless, eternal nature of your true self, the petty anxieties of earthly existence lose their grip. This seismic shift in my inner landscape inevitably led to global changes in my life. My old priorities, once so clearly defined by societal norms and personal comforts, crumbled into irrelevance. The pursuit of power, prestige, fame, or competition became utterly meaningless. These were the fleeting illusions of a world I now saw through a different lens. What was the point of accumulating material wealth or social status when you understood that your true essence was pure, boundless love connected to all? I acquired a deep, almost reverential reverence for nature, seeing its immense beauty not as a separate entity, but as an integral part of the same divine tapestry. A simple walk in the woods became a profound spiritual experience. Each leaf, each stone.
With this new understanding came a clear, undeniable mission: to share my story. My prayers, which had once been more about requests, now came back as a powerful, singular message: share your story. This wasn't a choice. It was a compelling inner directive, a profound obligation to convey the truth I had been shown. My purpose became to be a conduit for this message of unconditional love and interconnectedness, to offer a glimpse into the reality that awaits beyond the veil of physical life. It's not about converting anyone, but about simply laying out the truth as I experienced it, hoping it resonates with those who are ready to hear. This integration back into earthly life was not without its difficulties and challenges. The most significant was the profound sense of isolation.
How do you explain the unexplainable to a world that relies on tangible evidence and logical progression? People often try to compartmentalize my experience, to fit it into neat boxes of psychological phenomena or religious doctrine. I tell them, you cannot think your way to understanding it. This often confuses them further. The depth of the experience, the non-linear nature of the knowledge gained, simply cannot be grasped by the linear analytical mind. This lack of comprehension at times led to quiet judgment, a subtle distancing from those who couldn't reconcile my transformation with their own reality. There were moments of existential loneliness, a profound yearning to truly connect with someone who understood the vastness of what I had been privileged to witness. Yet despite these challenges, a fundamental shift occurred. I'm not always happy in the fleeting emotional sense of the word, but I am always at peace. This peace is not dependent on external circumstances. It is an internal state, a deep well of serenity that triumphs over the vicissitudes of life. Peace will always trump happiness, for happiness is ephemeral, while peace is an enduring truth. I have, in essence, transcended the earth, even while still inhabiting this physical form. My ego, the self-centered construct of my former identity, collapsed in that timeless void. The ability to stop thinking at will is a true gift, a gateway to that inner stillness where the true self resides. So, this is my story, a testament to the enduring power of love, the profound mystery of existence, and the glorious reality that awaits us all. My hope is that by sharing, I can offer a glimmer of what awaits, a whisper of the truth that lies beyond our earthly understanding. May you find your own path to love and peace, and may God bless you all. We are all connected, all part of the same divine fabric. Remember that.
If this story touched something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let others know love never ends. And if you've ever had your own experience beyond the veil, we'd be honored to hear it. Thank you for staying until the end. Keep walking in love. You are never alone. God bless you, and may His peace be with you always.